Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. And you can find this, you're going to want to watch this episode, especially if you can, on YouTube. So youtube.com/Annette Talks. And you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and a few other places. Wherever you can find podcasts, you'll find me. And today I'm joined again by Nate Ottosen. Hi, Nate.
Hi there. How's it going?
Good. This is our third episode now, right?
It is, yeah.
And yeah, so
it went by just like that.
That's right. If you haven't listened to Nate before, he did an episode with me on guns and how to find them and ammo in difficult times. So go find that one. And then we just recorded one, which you will have seen this a week ago, posted on how he handled when the electricity and water went out for him in Texas. And so that was a great episode. And today we're going to continue on with sort of prep topic. And this one's on bug out bags and what to put in them, and specifically knives. And so if you can watch it on YouTube, you'll want to see these knives. So we're going to describe them for you that are just listening. But if you want to see them, check me out on YouTube. And please subscribe, like, and share these episodes, because I'm trying to build an audience, and then any help is greatly appreciated. All right, so Nate, last time we talked about you were stuck at home with the electricity out and the water down. And so you gave us a lot of great suggestions on what to do and how you handled it. But now we want to talk about times when staying at home is not the best option. And so you're going to need to bug out. And so I've heard the expression bug out bags, but for a lot of us, bug out bags it can be anywhere from camping gear to, I watch a lot of cop shows and stuff. And so criminals have I picture fake passports and cash and stuff like that. That's not the kind of bug out bag that we're talking about here. So first, tell us what situations or scenarios you see for when you would need to bug out.
So I firmly believe that if you can stay in your home, you should, because that you've got a lot more gear at home. Mostly you're a lot safer at home, but there are going to be times when you're just not going to be safe at home. Here in Texas, for example, if you've got a hurricane coming and that storm surge is going to be big enough that it's going to flood your house, you better bug out. If for some reason your local government has fallen apart and you've lost rule of law, you better bug out.
Wow.
Now, I can't really tell you every situation or scenario, but like I said in the last episode, one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to use your head. You've absolutely got to use your head. One of the things that you can remember is an acronym. I think that's the right word.
Acronym.
Yeah, acronym. You can remember the thing stop. So you stop, S, think, T, observe, and plan. Just remember, I always make this joke, right? That there are the three laws of Nate. Rule number one is don't panic. Mm-hmm. Rule number two is never forget rule number one. And rule number three is always have your knife.
All right, sweet.
Yeah, and I believe that's my go-to. So don't panic, stop, sit, think, observe, and plan. That's what you need to do in an emergency. And if you're like, do I need to bug out or not? Well, if you think that your life is going to be in danger if you stay, then you need to go. And you need to pile your stuff up in your Toyota. And you need to look as unobtrusive as possible, and you've got to quietly get out. If you have a chance, try to plan where you're going to go before you go. Try to have an idea of what you're going to do. You're not always going to be able to do that, but you should. When you do put together a bug out bag, like I said, you get in your Toyota minivan and go. I make a joke about that, but if you're on your way out of town with a lot of people and there are always going to be predators out there. If you're in your nice little Humvee or your Escalade, those are the first people those predators are going to go after. If you have a 1998 Toyota minivan, they're not even going to look at you. So,
that is great news for me, because I just happen to have one and only vehicle, which is an older Toyota minivan. But you know what? That Toyotas run forever. So if you, I keep mine maintained, and it's, I want to say it's a 2005. So it's pretty old. And the last time I took it to the mechanic, and it's only been for maintenance stuff up until really recently. And well, even then, yeah, it's only mostly maintenance. But I said, how's it look? This looks really good for a vehicle that's 15 years old, now 16. But I've had someone tell me that Toyotas, if you maintain them, they're going to go 300,000 or more miles. So
that's what I've heard.
So, you know, we kind of laugh about it, and it's kind of becoming a hoopty. But the engine's going to run and run and run as long as I maintain it. So one of the things that I do with the thought of having to bug out is I always make sure that my vehicle is well maintained. So because if that thing might have to get me pretty far, so I don't want it to not be well maintained.
It will. And the nice thing about that minivan is there's a lot of room in it. I used to have a Jeep Liberty, and when I was a Scoutmaster, I could put I could put gear for myself and gear for 2 of my Scouts in it, and then it was full. And it had 4 seats. I was like, I don't have room for that 3rd Scout anywhere. And so it was a problem. Whereas if I had a Toyota minivan, I could have had room for their gear, my gear, everybody else's gear, and it's unobtrusive. So
yeah, nobody wants my vehicle.
when you put together your bug out bag, you want to kind of think about that too. If you have to walk out and you have the latest in backpacking gear and equipment, you have the nicest, glossiest stuff with the price tag still on it. That's a rob me first sticker right there. You want to avoid stuff like that if you can. I recommend rolling your stuff up in a blanket like the Civil War guys used to do, wrapping it around your shoulder and bugging out that way. Because the other thing that a lot of people do with their bug out bags is they're just too darn heavy. Because if you have to bug out and you're not going to use your car, you've got to move. You've got to move quickly. When I first started thinking about what I would use now for a bug out bag, I didn't actually think of it as a bug out bag. What I started doing, I came to this different than most people do. I came to this because I wanted to reenact the way that long hunters along the American frontier in the 1700s, they would professionally hunt deer. And I wanted to travel the way that they did. And so I looked into what they felt like they had to have for shelter, what they had for food, and how they managed to get by with the minimal amount of equipment, and how they stayed comfortable. And when I looked into that, I was like, oh, I see how this works. And then later I found people going bug out bag. And I was like, oh, that's just like what the long hunters did. And that's how I kind of came to the idea of this is how you should put your bug out bags together. So it's a little different than most people, but it still works great.
All right. So what, should we start with knives, or do we want to end with knives?
Well, boy, yes. What you want to do? So I think, of course, your first and most important piece of survival kit is in your head. That space between your ears, that's where you want it. And if you've got knowledge, the more you know, the less you have to carry. And that's important. Remember, bug out bags need to be light. So you want to think about what you're doing. Now, I recommend for everybody who's interested in this, they should probably pick up this book. This is called Bushcraft 101. It's by David Canterbury. And David Canterbury is a real character. If he were alive with Davy Crockett, they would hang out. They'd be able to talk to each other. They'd know. They'd be on each other's wavelength.
And it said a field guide to, what was the bottom there? A field guide to.
Oh, sorry, a field
guide to the art of wilderness survival. All right.
Now, this is a fantastic book. It's light. It won't take up any any room in your bug out bag to speak of. If things get really bad and you know what's in it, you can use the paper to help you light fires and for other things. But one of the things that David Canterbury has that I really believe in is he's got a principle called the 5 C's. Now, I know that we already did a stop thing, but I like that he talks about what you've got to have to survive is you have to have cutting tools, you have to have cover, you have to have cordage, you have to have combustion, you have to have things to make a fire, and you have to have things to cook with. So you've got your 5 C's. That's, like I said, recommend his books. He has a lot of videos too here on YouTube. If you type in David Canterbury, his stuff will roll up all over the place. And I hope he doesn't get upset that I'm telling you his content, because I really want to sell you his idea. Is that the right way to put that?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I already want the book now. So I think as soon as we get off recording, I'm going to go find it on Amazon. So I'm sure he'll appreciate you promoting it.
It's a fantastic book with great illustrations. It talks about all the things that you would want a book like that to talk about. It says, here's how to make a fire when it's wet. Here's recipes. If you have to live off the land, here's some food you can eat in North America that you can gather. Here's some recipes. He talks about how you can make your own survival food under difficult circumstances in that book. It's a really good book to have. Wow. So everybody should have a copy of this, and you ought to read through it 3 or 4 times, and then once you've got it, take it with you camping and practice some of that so that you know how to do it. If you know all of that stuff but you've never actually done it before, it's a little bit different the first time. It's a lot easier once you've tried it a few more times. So I'd recommend the idea
of camping, but I totally see now that if I ever have a hope of surviving out in the wilderness, I've got to figure some of this stuff out and bite the bullet and just learn how to do it.
Right, because a lot of times when people go camping for their first time and they don't know what they're up against, they're uncomfortable, and nobody wants to be uncomfortable in the woods. So if you can talk to somebody like me and work with me or Dave and get through that, you're in a lot better shape. All right, but we do gotta, let's talk a little bit about stuff, right? The first thing I want to talk about, this is a Swiss Army knife. Okay, now everybody in the world, everywhere, should have one of these. I think these are legal in all countries. There are a lot of knives that I've got here today that you can't have in some countries like Great Britain, but you can have a Swiss Army knife like this. If just for like technical, this is a slip joint pocket knife, so that means you can open it like this, and it has it's got a spring that keeps it open so it doesn't lock. There are a lot of folding knives that lock, and those are illegal in a lot of countries, and even some places in the United States.
What bizarre!
I know, but this is just an ordinary Swiss Army knife, and they have really handy extra tools. I think all of them have these little tweezers.
Oh yeah, you get you get a splinter or something.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's an infection if you don't get it out. Nobody wants an infection during the middle of the bug out.
I didn't go right to tweezing eyebrows with that. Because
oh well, there you go. But ticks, you can pull your ticks off with this.
Yeah, because ticks.
Yeah. Well, and ticks are a problem if you live in the South or even in Colorado in the summer.
Haven't had it so far, thank goodness.
This is, I forget which one this is, but I recommend not getting too big a Swiss Army knife. Most people who buy Swiss Army knives, they make the mistake of buying too big a knife, and then it's bulky and they don't like to carry it.
A small one, yeah.
Yeah, get a normal. Well, it's not tiny.
Yeah, well, when I first saw it, I thought that looks kind of small, so I guess I must be used to seeing guys with big Swiss Army knives.
They are.
I have one actually got taken at the airport when I was flying, and so yeah, I need to get a new one.
You do. Now, when you go to get one, if you can see this, this has a saw blade.
Yeah, I didn't know there's saw blades on those. That's awesome.
Yeah, make sure you get one with the saw blade. Now, we'll talk about little folding saws later in this episode, hopefully, if we've got time, because that's a really important tool. But if you don't have a good folding saw, you need your little Swiss Army knife saw, because that makes a huge difference in so many situations. If you want to build a raised platform to sleep on so that you can get off of the ground, if you've got to build some stuff to hold your kettle up, all kinds of things like that, you need a little saw like that. It makes all the difference in the world. If you've got kids, they all ought to have one of these, and they ought to be on a lanyard around their neck, so that they don't lose it no matter what. This ought to be the number one thing that they always have.
Yeah.
Because you need that Swiss Army knife more than anything else. Then the next thing, here it is. That's what I was looking for. The thing that I would.
Yeah, we can't hear you when you're all okay. Now come back and see what you were saying.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. The thing that I just have this big pile of stuff here. This is a little magnesium fire starter.
Oh, okay.
And you scrape the magnesium off on this side, and then you take this side, and you run this steel across it.
Oh, right. Yeah,
the
last time I went camping with an ex-boyfriend, he had one of those, and we started a fire.
These are fantastic. So if you take this and you put your little loop on your Swiss Army knife, right, and you have that, and you put those together, and you put some paracord around there, and you put that around your neck, you have some of the most important things you've got to have right there with you, because then you'll have.
What kind of cord around the neck?
Oh, paracord. So I forget that not everybody knows what all of this stuff is. This is paracord, yeah, and you can actually get it at Hobby Lobby or any place like that.
Okay.
You can order it off of Amazon.
I'm taking notes because I'm going to do all this. This is awesome.
Yeah, you should get some paracord. I keep this certain. I've got a bow line on this, right? So that I can just wrap this around a tree immediately and use it for stuff. I'd have to do a whole nother episode on hammock camping to explain why this is so handy. But this stuff is not expensive. It's very strong. It's pretty water, and it's pretty resistant to water and sunshine. So you can keep, if you tie something up with this, it'll stay tied up for a long time.
All right. So Nate, you said something in there that took my mind off into another place. You said we needed to do an episode on happy camping.
Hammock camping.
Hammock camping. Well, I think we should I think we need to do an episode on camping, actually.
Okay.
Because if people are stuck someplace with their bug out bag and they're forced into camping, then we need to talk about that. But I'm going to call it happy camping because that's a fun title. But you've been trying to sell me on hammock camping when we've been chatting on instant message recently, and I don't know what that looks like. So we may have to talk about that. We may do an episode called Happy Camping, where we go into depth on how to use some of this stuff.
Well, what I probably ought to do is I'll try to do. I camp a lot, but I haven't for the past year or so because of COVID. But I'll try to do a couple of camp outs in the next few months, and I'll video some of the stuff I do. That's awesome. So that I can give you that content, and then you can show your people. That way I'm like, okay, so here's how you hang your hammock like this so that you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
We could do maybe just a YouTube video and use the clips. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That'd be good.
Onto another topic.
So anyway, you got your paracord. Now, if I've got a bug out bag, right, and I want to have the minimal stuff possible, the other thing that I try to do is I try to have some plastic. This is actually a trash bag. It's a real thick, heavy trash bag, and you can get them on Amazon. That's where I got this one.
It's orange. Did you get it orange on purpose?
it's hard to show how long it is, but it's the thing that's nice about this. Do what?
I just said, did you purposely buy it in orange? Was there a reason for that?
Yes, I bought it in orange because that way, the nice thing about that bag is you can fold that up into an Altoids 10 and you can put it in your pocket. But it's great if you get stuck and you don't have any other equipment, because you can cut a hole in it and make it a poncho, or you can split it in half and then suddenly you have a tarp so that you can cover yourself. If you don't have anything else to sleep in, you can at least get inside that and it'll reflect a lot of your body heat back. And all of that goes in an Altoids 10. So if everything goes wrong, you've at least got your Swiss Army knife, your little fire starter, and your little Altoids 10 with your bag in it. And that will give you cordage, cutting tools, and cover. And that at least will get you through your first little while.
And that's pretty minimal. That's not beyond any of our reach to go ahead and gather those few little things.
Exactly. And that's pretty easy to do. And if you got that, you're good to go, as long as you know a little bit about what you're doing and you have some experience.
And we'll take the book along with you too.
So, if you got the book, you should take the book with you. If you don't have the book, you should have at least camped enough that you kind of know what's in it.
Yeah, I'll have to find someone. I am going to buy the book though, and I'm going to read it, and I'm going to become an expert, at least mentally, before I start going out there and trying to do it.
Mentally is a good place to start. If you know what to do and you've got that knowledge, even if you've never done it before, you may have a little bit of an awkwardness getting started, but you'll be there.
Sweet.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of knife to pick for your bug out bag, or you want to talk about what else I put in my bug out bag?
Let's do the other stuff, and then let's finish with the knives, because there's going to be a lot of cool visual aids.
All right. So the other thing that I always put in my bug out bag is I always try to have a good heavy wool
behind the blanket.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It's a wool blanket.
Yeah, I always try to have a good heavy wool blanket in my bug out bag. You need 100% wool if you can get it, but it doesn't have to be 100% wool. You can get by with 80 or 90%. If you start to get down to 70, you're looking at commercially produced blankets that are junk. So don't do that. If you're going to make a good bug out bag, I always think that where you want to spend your most money is in your knife. And we'll talk about why that is later. After that, I think the next thing you want to spend your money on is your blanket. So get as good a blanket as you can reasonably afford. A blanket like this costs about $75, and it's fairly well felted. It's a pretty good wool. It's got a good loft to it. Most of the decently priced ones are coming out of India, but you can get a lot of them from Ecuador or Peru now that are pretty good too. Just make sure you get a big enough one. A lot of the ones coming out of Ecuador and Peru are a little too small. You want to try to get one that weighs at least 3.5 pounds, but 4.5 is better. But yeah, you want a good wool blanket. We talked a little bit on the last episode about cleaning them because they'll have a lot of oil in them for preserved purposes or preserving purposes. So if they're just going to sit on your shelf forever and you're waiting for an emergency, don't wash them. But if they're ones you're going to use, you go ahead and put some Woolite in them, you wash them, and they're good to go after that.
Oh, so you wait until you know you're going to use it before you wash it.
Well, I've got the blankets that I use, and then if I had some that were in storage, I'd just leave them the way they came. I'd even leave them in the what do you call it? They come in a plastic zip or a plastic sealed bag. So if you're using them for storage, just leave them in there. If they're ones you're going to camp with, you're going to use them, then you should do that. Now, there's another thing. Some people are allergic to wool. That's got to be really frustrating. I'm lucky I'm not, but some people are. If you're allergic to wool, then this is called a woobie. And it's basically an army blanket. And I guess what they say, they call it a woobie because without it, you would be cold.
That's cute.
And a woobie is a pretty good thing to have if you can't have a wool blanket. Now, the problems with the woobies is they're flammable, and wool blankets are not as flammable. So you have to be careful when you've got this around the fire. There's actually a few little holes in here because my ex-girlfriend got it a little too close to the fire. That's okay. I didn't mind. She was pretty enough. I'd forgive her that. Nice thing about woobies is you can usually pick these up at a surplus shop for about $35. Another really nice thing about a woobie is there's a whole bunch of little ties on them.
Oh,
This can be really handy because that means you can tie your blanket to another blanket, or if like you're sleeping in a hammock, you can, one of the problems with sleeping in a hammock is it's very hard to keep a blanket around you. But if you've got a tie, you can tie it to parts of the hammock, and that way it won't move around while you're sleeping. This is a woobie is actually designed to be a poncho liner, a military poncho liner, and those are there so that you can tie them into your poncho. So if you've got a poncho too, that'd be great, but they're noisy and they're hot, and I don't use them in Houston, but a lot of people do. But a woobie's a good thing to have if you don't have a wool blanket.
all right. Sounds like those blankets are really important.
Well, because it's cover.
Yeah.
Even if it's 40 degrees, if you're sleeping on the ground and it's 40 degrees, you're a cold person.
Yes.
Because you're losing calories really fast, and your body's going, I don't like this. Get me out of this situation. And I do watch, I don't like to think of myself as a survivalist or a prepper. I'm just a guy who likes to hang out and camp and do a few things in the woods. But I have watched a few people who do their little survival shows, and they'll go into the woods with just a knife. And a lot of them say, you know, the one thing I would rather have is a sleeping bag, because then I get some real rest at night. And it's true, there are ways you can get by without a sleeping bag. You can use leaves and boughs from the trees. And if you read Canterbury's book, he does a pretty good job of describing it. Uh-oh, have you still got me?
I do. It just froze for a second.
Okay. Okay, good. So if you read Canterbury's book, he talks a little bit about that, but that's what a lot of the long hunters used to do. They would build up beds of leaves, but that takes a tremendous amount of time. And if you're trying to move fast and you need to get away from a difficult situation, you may not have that kind of time. I've got another thing here. This is now that wool blanket cost about $70, but there are good ones that cost about $35. A woobie, it costs about $35. This is a nice little quilt from REI. It's an underquilt for my hammock. It has a much higher R factor than either of those. This thing is incredibly warm, and it weighs absolutely nothing.
Nice.
And if I always keep this in my bug out bag, no matter the circumstance, because it's dark, so it's black on one side and orange on the other. So if I want to not be seen, I can put it dark side up. And if I'm worried about hunters or I want people to know where I am, I can orange side up it and be seen. And it's just fantastic. It's down into this tiny little package, and it weighs nothing. So, but it's expensive. I think it cost me $170. And so you pay for it. I wouldn't want anyone to see that I had that piece of gear, because that's the kind of gear that they want to shoot you for.
Right.
So if you have something like that, make sure you can't see it. We talked a little bit about coal and getting off the ground. This is just an insulation. It's a little foam pad. It's not very thick. And so when you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not that comfortable to sleep on. Well, you're missing the point. You need that insulation. This isn't designed for squishy comfort. It's designed to keep you warm. So if you got something like this and you can roll it out, that'll help. And I think this cost me $5 at a Academy Sports and Outdoors. I used to buy a lot of these when I had scouts, because inevitably they would forget. and I would give them these and they would be so much warmer. So something like this doesn't cost you much. You can roll it up, put it on top of your backpack, carry it on a tump line. Uh, just however, it doesn't weigh anything. You can get good ones. I mean, you can get sophisticated ones, or you can get ones that are less fancy than this too. But you got to have something like this in your bag. You got to get off the ground. Now, if you're in a situation where you don't have that, but you still have that little thing that you put in your car in the summer in front of your wind in your,
Oh, right, like a visor or that keeps the sun out.
yeah, that'll work pretty good too. Just make sure that you've got the foil looking side up towards your body. That's better than nothing, and that'll make a huge difference. So if you get stuck in a situation and you've got one of those, sleep on that. All
We
right.
have those. Everyone in Arizona has those. I haven't seen many here in Denver, but yeah, when I lived in Arizona, you did not own a car without one of those because otherwise you come back to an oven. So I'm assuming Texas is similar.
Texas is exactly the same way. Now I'm looking for my white handkerchief and I cannot find it.
So what do you do with the black handkerchief?
I've got a white handkerchief and I always keep it in my left back pocket because you never can tell whether you're going to need some clean cotton cloth. Either you can use it for a band-aid or a bandage, I mean, or um, you can use it like you know that little tea kettle that we had on the last episode? It's got that little handle. That little handle always gets hot,
Right.
and you'll burn yourself if you don't hold it with something. And it's that way with a lot of things. And if you have a little handkerchief, you use it for all kinds of stuff. If it's cotton and it's dry and you don't have any other tinder, you can use that to help start your fire.
Huh.
You just really need a little handkerchief like that, and it doesn't take up any space. They're not expensive. Just make sure they're cotton, and that'll help out a lot. The other thing that I always like is a scarf. Now, I'll admit this is a schmagah, or however you say that. And I know you've probably seen people coming back from the desert with these. Well, they like them because doggone, they're really useful. But if all you can get is a bandana or your Boy Scout scarf, whatever you got like that, keep it with you because they really are handy. When I was a scoutmaster and I'd teach my boys, I'd be like, now wear your scarf. I hate that. It looks so old fashioned. It's so 20th century. And I'm like, yeah, but it's really handy. And then they'd get out in the woods and they would need that and they wouldn't have it. And I'm like, now, what was that for? You know, if you get into a situation and you need clean water, you can fold this up and it'll act as a filter.
Right.
Now boil it afterwards because it'll only filter out the big things and it won't filter out any of the bugs that make you sick. But it will filter that water a lot, make it taste a whole heck of a lot better. If you can, like you live in Colorado, right? Boil that water and put some of those pine needles in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because those pine needles will make a tea that has a lot of vitamin C in it.
Oh.
And exactly. And they tell me that doesn't taste too bad, but you have to be careful where you live because the pine needles in Texas are toxic, but the ones in Colorado are not.
Oh, okay.
So when you look up pine needle tea, you need to make sure you have the right pine. And I don't know where everybody lives who listens to this. So if you're going to try that, it's a great way to get vitamin C. It's a great way to make your warm water for breakfast taste a little bit better if you don't have anything else. But be careful because if you live in Texas, that's not the right stuff. If you live in Texas, you have to pick up the leaves from a Yupon holly and you have to toast that and boil that into a tea. And that stuff is pretty good. It's got quite a shot in it of caffeine. And so it'll help keep you running a little longer if you're in a difficult situation. I don't know which other states have a lot of Yupon holly. Native Americans used to trade it all up and down the coast because that was their tea and coffee.
Interesting.
And we've lost that over time. So Yupon holly is a pretty good plant for that. there's some stuff up there in Utah they call Mormon tea, and they make it from nettles, I think, but I don't know what kind. Somebody will have to chime in that knows what that is. But that stuff will give you a good epinephrine shot if you're having a little trouble breathing.
Oh, wow.
Kind of nice. It'll give you a little energy too. But you can filter your water with this. I always keep a scarf in my bug out bag. They don't cost you any money, and they really come in handy. Since I camp with the hammock most of all, I have a tarp. Now the thing is, this is I can't remember. This was this is 4.5 meters by 2.5 meters, so it's actually a pretty good sized tarp. This one's by D&D Hammocks. They're actually, usually I buy American when I can. Almost always I buy American, but I actually like D&D's products a little bit better. And so I bought this. It's a huge tarp. It weighs nothing. It weighs less than the Nerf football, and it's about the same size, but it's huge.
You unfold it, right?
You unfold it, and then you can do all kinds of things with the tarp like this that you can't do with the tent. When you've got a tent, you're limited to your tent being your tent. If you have a tarp like this, you can fold it into a great big lean-to and cover an area for a lot of people. You can make tarp tents out of it, by the way, that you fold it up into a tarp tent. But one of the things that happens, particularly here in Texas, is you get a wet, humid day, and you get those modern tents that are all kind of one piece. They call it bathtub construction. That humidity will just roll down the walls into the bottom of the tent, and it gets wet in there because of that. And you don't have to deal with the problem like that if you're using just a tarp like this. So, I recommend somebody getting a tarp and a hammock, but if you don't like hammocks, get a tarp like this and learn how to pitch it like a tent, and you'll be comfortable. You'll be a lot more comfortable, and it's cheaper than buying a $350 tent. And it takes up less space, and it's certainly, I don't know what this weighs, but it weighs nothing. And so I recommend a tarp when you can get it. You can do a lot more with it. If you've got, like with you've got a few people, you put together a few bug out bags, you put a couple of tarps in there, and then somebody else can carry something else. And you've covered a lot of needs that you're going to have. So
awesome.
That's a little bit about that. We covered a little bit about containers in our last episode. I showed you my little pot that I use to boil water in, and my little kettle. Those are the containers I take with me the most. If you can, bring along I've got a little tiny skillet, a cast iron skillet. Mm-hmm. And I like those because you can put that right on the fire, on the coals, and it'll distribute the heat better. It's easier to deal with than a lot of other, if you put, what do you call that stuff? The non-stick stuff, Teflon, right on the fire like that, it'll melt, and it make a mess sometimes. So I like a little cast iron skillet. I usually like my stuff as light as possible, but that's one of the areas where I'm like, okay, I'm going to deal with a little weight because I'm going to get a lot of performance out of that weight. Sweet. But that's most of the stuff that I put in a bug out bag. We talked a little bit about how I keep my stuff. I actually have my stuff in a drawer and not a bag. And I keep my bag close by, and that way I can say, all right, look, I'm going to need to do this. I can have my equipment be much more mission specific. If I know I'm going to be gone for 3 months and it's all going to be summer, I'm not going to take the same stuff as if I'm going to be gone for 2 months and it's going to be this kind of weather. Mm-hmm. So I keep it. I got my bug out drawer.
What kind of bag do you use?
It's just I use just a little cheap backpack. It's I forget how many liters. It's a good sized bag, but it's not an expensive one. And it's navy blue because I don't want it to be camouflage. Anything you got that's camouflage is telling people, hey, this is equipment. It might be really good equipment, and I don't want to do that. I want people to not notice what I've got. So you know, even if you just put all this in a little Jant's backpack, and you know, like you use for school, and then you roll up your blanket on the outside of it, tie it up with some paracord, put it on there, you're a lot better off with that than you are with equipment that looks like it just was some new expensive stuff right out of REI.
Right.
And so that's what I try to use. Now, if we've really lost the rule of law and things have gotten difficult already, I mean, really difficult, then I'm going to go ahead and use whatever I can get, whether it's camouflage or not.
Right.
Because at that point, I'm not so worried about getting robbed as I am surviving. So I'll take whatever I can there. But if we're in a situation where we're starting to lose rule of law, but we've still got a little bit, and I can get out of town, get away from people, I want to do that as quietly and as plainly as possible.
All right, let's go to knives, because I know you've got some.
Let's go to knives. All right, now, one of the things that I think a lot of people neglect, where'd it go? I had that thing here. There it is. The first thing that a lot of people neglect, oh, this is just the sheath. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's just leather. I put
Okay.
this together because it came in a plastic container, and I was like, that'll break. That'll never work if I fall or whatever. It won't. And one of the things I will say about knife sheaths, though, for those of you who can see this, you can see I've got a ring here.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are listening, it's got something that looks like a belt loop, and then there's a ring, and then there's another loop around it. We call that a dangler. And I like that because you can dangle that from your belt or the straps on your backpack. You can just clip it around whatever you want to clip it around. You know, I've just got little snaps that snap it in. That way you don't have to take your belt off to take your knife off, or you can hang your gear wherever you want to hang it. It just makes things a lot more versatile. It's just, I believe if you've got an important piece of gear and you're using snaps, I like to have 2 snaps, because you might lose 1 snap while you're walking around. You don't usually lose 2. I do like to kind of check on it, though, if I'm hiking very far, because like I don't want to lose most of this.
So
but
where do you get a knife sheath from?
Well, most of the knives that you buy are going to come with one.
Oh, okay.
But if they don't, you can, I make mine. I know that's not a lot of help, but actually it's not hard to make them. But if you can't make one and you don't have one, you can buy them from Texas Knife Makers Supply.
Okay.
Call up Lance at Texas Knife Makers Supply and say, I was watching Nate on YouTube, and he said that you have some pre-made knife sheaths. And Lance will go, that guy gets me in more trouble. But Lance will help you out with that. He's got a lot of pre-made ones that come from Japan and other places. It'll fit most stuff. Texas Knife Makers Supply is a great place to buy knife making supplies. And I recommend them. They've always helped me when I make my own knives. They've given me a lot of good stuff to work with. Well, I bought a lot of good stuff to work with from them, but I've gotten distracted. This isn't actually a knife.
Oh, it is?
It's not.
Oh,
this is a folding saw.
Oh, that's a folding saw. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
It's a folding saw this one's made by Silky of Japan. It's called a Gomboy. And this is something that people leave out of their 72-hour kit or their bug out bag all the time, and you really need this.
Folding saw. Okay.
If you're gonna have firewood, you can chop it down with the hatchet, but hatchets are heavy and bulky, and I don't like carrying them. So I get a good folding saw like this that just you saw it locks open, and then you can. Yeah, this is a Gomboy made by Silky, but there are other companies who make these saws that are pretty okay. SOG has a good one. Browning has an okay one. These cost a little bit more, but this is one of the areas where you can spend $35 or $40 and it's worth every penny. So, but get a good folding saw. If you're going to do a lot of camping, if you're going to do any bug out bag, get a good folding saw. This isn't heavy. and you need it. Now, I've seen a lot of people buy knives for their 72-hour kits or their bug out bags, and they'll get something like this. This is a Benchmade. I forget which model this is. Benchmade makes pretty good knives for the money. I've got a lot of Benchmades because really for commercially made knives, when it comes to steel and performance, Benchmade is the great balance between I can spend so much money and get so much effectiveness. And then after this point, I'm starting to lose, you know, I've spent more money than it's actually worth. Benchmade has it. Now, that's of this time when we write this in 5 years. If you're still watching this, I don't know if Benchmade will still have the quality, but right now they're freaking fantastic.
All right.
Anyway, this is a great knife for fighting. This is not a great knife for your bug out bag. The handles are aluminum, and so they're cold if it's the winter time. And if that's in your bug out bag, you're not going to appreciate that. This blade is coated, which is really nice if you're afraid that people are going to bleed all over it and it's going to ruin the steel. But you don't care if that's in your bug out bag. If you don't care about that, the back end of this, the spine of the knife right along here, that is not a nice sharp 90-degree angle. All right. And if you're going to have a survival knife, the back end of it has to be a nice sharp 90-degree angle to the blade, because I'll show you why in a minute. You got to bear with me for a second. If you buy a knife like this, it's better than not having a knife. You know, it's a good knife, but this is a fighting knife. This isn't a bug out knife. Don't buy this one for that.
Okay.
And it's even kind of expensive. So let me give you another knife example that I recommend avoiding. This is a really nice knife made by Beretta. Now it's got some nice things, like it has some paracord in the handle. So if you get stuck, you've always got that for an emergency. It's nice to grip it, you know, and it keeps the handle nice and warm. But if you get in an emergency, it'll help you tie up a couple of tarps, you know, keep or some sticks or whatever. But this has two things that make it a terrible bushcrafting knife. The first one is this back of the spine. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it looks smooth.
It's round.
Yeah.
Now, that's the thing with a lot of Italian knives. They'll have a nice round back of the spine. It's a fine thing. It's comfortable, but you can't use it. It's not good for Benchmade, or not Benchmade, for bushcrafting.
Right.
The other thing is, I don't know if you can tell how this is ground, but this is hollow ground. What that means is that it's got a convex grind. Concave. It's got a concave. It's got a concave grind. A concave grind is just not as strong as a flat grind or a convex grind, and it won't hold an edge as well. And it's messy in the woods. I don't particularly care for them. I don't know how else to call it other than messy. And this knife is not a bad knife, but it wouldn't be my first choice. And that's not what I'd pick if I were going into the woods. It's got a Kydex sheath. So it's plastic essentially, but it's a really nice, tough plastic. It's okay. It's okay. These are expensive knives, but it's not my first choice. Let's talk a little bit about some knives though that would be my first choice. Here's a Benchmade knife again. You see it's got a little dangler, right? I really like that on a sheath for any kind of camping, any kind of bushcrafting. This knife has a nice sharp square spine right here. It's got a nice flat edge. It's made from what was it? 3B steel, which is a real high-tech steel. It's the new stuff. I have had this on 3 campouts, and it's still so sharp you can shave with it.
Wow.
And if you think about, you know, as soon as I tell you one of the things I use these knives for, you'll be impressed that the edge lasted like that. The other thing
Is
about
that, what is that called for people that wanted to find that?
oh, this is a Benchmade Puko.
Puko?
Puko, yeah. And if you ask me how to spell Puko, I'll be like,
You don't know. Okay. We'll figure it out. We'll find it.
yeah.
Benchmade though. Okay.
All right. But oh, this one's not this is the sheath, right? And you notice that this sheath has something extra on it.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, this is a fire steel.
Oh.
And so this has a loop so that you can keep your fire steel and your knife on there. Now, I want to show you how those fire steels work, but this is there, that one's already been used. That one's never been used, and they have a coating on them. And I don't want to scrape the coating off, so I'll use this one. But this is what I use to light my fires, and it's kind of nice because I showed you a little bit of that before. You just
So you're using the what do you call it, the spine of the knife?
fine. If that's at a nice sharp 90 degrees, you can just scrape that stuff right
you're
off
making
there.
fire. Awesome.
That's right, and that'll work if your wood's a little damp. You know, I mean, that's so many more than a match. I mean, that's not the right way to put that. You can't carry that many matches.
That's
right?
what I was thinking of. That was my thought. Was you don't. This is much better than trying to take a bunch of matches out in the woods.
That's right. And one of the things I do kind of like about, and I don't want to be a Benchmade commercial, but one of the things I do like about this is that there's also some treated tinder in here. So if you find yourself in a real emergency situation, that's in a waterproof thing that's like that people keep their olive oil in. And it slides right onto that little loop on your sheath. Now that's last year, that was Benchmade's bushcrafting knife. This is the one they started this year. It's a little bit bigger. I like this one just a little bit more. It's called a Lyoku. Lyoku, yeah. I like this one.
The blade's bigger than the other one. Yeah,
it is. But here's the thing: if you don't use your knife, if you don't use a lot of knives, that's a little harder one to handle than this. This size is perfect. If
that
you
was
don't,
the first one that you showed us, right?
That's right. That's this Puko. And it's perfect for 99% of what you would need to use a knife for. And it's a lot easier to handle. You're much less likely to, oops, I accidentally cut my finger off with the knife this size. Right. So I really recommend these little Benchmades for that. They have another knife. They actually call this their Bushcrafter. Now I made the sheath for it because the sheath that came with it was horrible. When I read the reviews on this knife, everybody said, "Oh, it's a fantastic knife," except for I lost mine in the woods because it came out of the sheath. Right? And so when I first bought this, the first time I took it out camping, I accidentally had it fall out of the sheath, and I had to look for it for an hour. But this is the Benchmade Bushcrafter. This is a pretty good knife. It's got a nice sharp spine. It has a shape that's really good for bushcrafting. But they're $245.
Oh gosh. How much was the Puko?
I think the Pukos and the Lyokus are about $125.
Okay.
Now, I know that those sound expensive, but the one place where you really, really shouldn't scrimp on your expenses is your knife, because this is supposed to have better steel, but those other two knives have edges that last longer. That is a fantastic steel. It won't rust. You can't kill it. You can't break it. You can't chip it. It's amazing. If our granddads had these, they would have just, I don't know, they couldn't have even considered a knife this nice back then. This is an actual fire steel that I made. This is just a piece of Shambar stag, and I got the actual fire steel off of Amazon. You can get little fire steels like this, and I think it cost me $10 for a dozen. And so, you know, I put it in there. You want to put a pin in it because glue doesn't stick well to these. And then I've got a little piece of bungee cord on here so that I can put that in my loop, and
Nice.
that way it's all in one little package. Talk a little bit about other knives that you might have access to. Oh, well, I do want to talk about another thing real fast. We talked a little bit about edges, and all of those Benchmade knives had a flat edge. So we had a convex edge, a concave edge.
Yeah.
Concave edge. We had flat edges. This one, I don't know if you can tell, it has a convex edge.
Yes.
So it rolls. These are actually, this is a nice little thin knife, but it actually handles real well in the woods. It does great in carving and all of that stuff. And it keeps an edge for a long time because it has that convex edge. It makes great fire sticks, which or feather sticks, which are you know, you roll a curl up out of it. Oh God, how do I describe that?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
If you take a piece of wood and you shave little curls off and you build those curls up, you have really thin wood that catches fire easily, and there's a lot of oxygen in between.
Oh, okay.
And so you make those feather sticks. They teach you how to do that in Scouts. Oh, sorry, it wasn't your fault. Yeah, but this is a great little feather sticking knife. Any knife with a convex edge will do a great job feather sticking, and it'll do a really good job cutting up vegetables and meat and things like that. So I don't know. This is my long hunter knife for when I said I kind of came at this reenacting in the beginning. I've actually got two that are built that way. This one you can kind of tell a little bit better probably. It's got a flat edge, and then right there towards the end it convexes. And it's a pretty tough knife for what it is. I've skinned and butchered a few deer with this. I'm not really a hunter. Here again, I just do that when I'm reenacting being a long hunter. But even this still makes a pretty good knife.
So what's the brand of those last two knives that you showed us? Do you have
the ones that I just
the one you showed us and then the one before? They look pretty similar.
Oh, these are just I actually got this one in Friendship, Indiana at the National Muzzleloader Rifle Shoot. I traded it to a guy who needed some work done on his flintlock, and I made the other one when I was
okay. So you're just showing us what they look like, what good knives look like.
Yeah, that's what good knives look like. And because I showed you some bad ones, here's this one. This is another one. This is in a Bowie pattern, and it's made by Boker, but it isn't a really good. It's an okay knife if you're out in the woods and you don't have anything else. It's okay, but what it doesn't have inside of it, the tang looks like this. Right? You get the handle around that, right? And so it doesn't go all the way through. Like, for instance, with this knife, you can see, well, this is a little tougher. We'll talk about this in a minute. It's a little tougher, but this one doesn't. It's got that, you know, inside, it's got that little piece of steel. And then this is better than not having a knife. It's not bad. It's about the right size. Now, the edge is concave, right? And we don't really like concave edges. We're not too big on clip points for our woodsy knives because it's
harder to start a fire.
Right? Yeah. Well, and like we said before, this is rounded back here. You couldn't strike a fire steel on that if you tried. So I always say avoid knives like that. Try to get you something that's more of a woods knife. This one will actually do both for you. It's designed for fighting, but it's also going to be a great woods knife. This all of this has got a nice sharp 90-degree edge. Like we talked about, it's got a good full tang construction. This isn't stainless steel. This is carbon steel. It's a nice, you know, I can't believe I can't remember what kind of carbon steel it is. But if you lose your fire steel, you can still strike the back of this with the flint and it'll spark.
Oh, okay. It's very
So
reflective
carbon,
too.
do what?
It's very reflective too.
Oh, well, that's just here. This is a knife I made. So
Oh,
that's just the high polish. I had the time to do that by hand rather than the people who are doing that all by machine.
you know, every time you say a fighting knife, I'm picturing people stabbing each other, but I'm also picturing stabbing animals. So if you're, you know, having to,
you could skin it with this real well. It's got a nice, it's yeah. But this is another Italian knife. This is a Beretta.
Oh.
But this is purpose built for skinning.
Oh, okay.
And if you see, this looks a lot different than the woodsy knives that we were looking at before. It's got this clip point. It has a very narrow profile up at the end. It's all built to do this sort of work.
Right.
And this would be better than no knife.
Right.
But this is not a good woods knife. So don't put this in your 72-hour kit if you have a choice. This is one of the first knives that I made. It has a tang, but it has what they call a Scandinavian edge. If you look at that, the flat goes straight through to the edge, right? Whereas if you look at this, I don't know if you can see that there's a secondary bevel on there. One with the better secondary bevel. All right. If you look here, I need to get rid of the, okay. See where there's a secondary, like a little reflection right now? That's the secondary edge. So you've got a V shape that goes down to a certain point, and then there's more of a V shape
right.
Okay. Almost all people who make knives do that because it's a little stronger and it's a whole lot easier. Some knives have a Scandinavian edge where it's just one long, straight flat. These are nice. These are really nice. They aren't quite as strong, but they work great. If you're like, all right, Nate, all of those knives that you showed me were really great. They were really cool, but they're just too expensive. I live in the real world. I don't have that kind of budget, right? I tell you, never fear. Go down to your nearest camping store and tell them you want a Mora Companion.
Mora Companion.
Yeah, a Mora Companion. Now, the thing is, I wish I weren't dyslexic, because if I weren't, I'd tell you, here's how you spell Mora. But I am. Now, the thing about a Mora Companion is it's really the Tupperware of knives. There's a lot of plastic used in their construction, but you can get a fantastic knife for $18 from them. Sweet. You ought to pay, for your Mora Companion, you should spend between $12 and $18. The thing about that is you also kind of want to think of them as sort of like Bic lighters. They're going to be disposable. They're not going to last forever. But if you don't have anything else, buy a Mora Companion and your Swiss Army knife. And at least for cutting tools, as long as you've bought a decent folding saw, you'll be set. When you go into the woods, you'll be able to do the things you need to do. They'll make you comfortable. You'll be really glad you have them. And when you're sitting there under the stars and you're like, oh, I'm not dying, you'll be like, thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's a really good place to stop, because knives are like filling my head now. And so all the knife people are thrilled. But for the rest of us that are not naturally knife people, we're like, okay, I think we've reached our limit of what we know about knives. But that was really great. I had no idea there were that. I mean, I'm sure that's just a small fraction of what knife options are out there in the world.
Yeah, that's not even a 101. That's just an
Yeah.
intro into what you got to have.
Yeah, exactly. Which is another reason why we're going to do Guns 101 later. But that was perfect for what we needed to know for bug out bags. And
Right.
so, and especially I'm glad that you told me about Mora Companion at the end, because I'm now determined to get a Swiss Army knife, a folding saw, and a Mora Companion, along with all the other things that you talked about at the beginning, at least, especially the tarp and the flint, what was it? The steel,
A fire steel.
fire steel, yes.
Yeah.
And a few of the other things that I have a whole list of stuff I've been writing down, but the book, I'm getting that book too, the Bushcraft 101.
Yeah.
So my head is now full, and I'm sure everyone that's listening is feeling the same way. It's like drinking from a fire hose. So I'm going to go back and listen to this again and again, and definitely get the book. So I really appreciate this. This was very, very helpful, along with your other episodes, and I'm sure your future episodes. So,
all right.
Thank you so much for your time, Nate.
Glad to be here. Glad to help. Hope that this does all y'all some good.
Oh, anyone that's paying attention and implement some of this, I'm sure it will. So
Great. Thank
you once again. And thank you all for listening to this episode. Again, I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Go to youtube.com/Annette Talks to watch these episodes, because you'll want to see some of the stuff you've been hearing about. So again, thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.